Welcome back to the Evolution of Mom podcast. I am so excited to have my special guest here today, Dr. Clayton Bostock, naturopath. This man came into my life at a very pivotal moment quite a few years ago when I was taking my health into my own hands, working on shifting my own hormone health. And he was actually very pivotal in my recovery and in my journey of being where I am now. So I am just so grateful to have reconnected with you and to have you here today. Thank you so much for coming.
Yeah, I'm happy to be here.
Yeah,
Good to see
thank you. I know, it's so great. So, I mean, I would love for you to just introduce yourself, maybe tell us a little bit about why you got into natural medicine.
Yeah, I mean, I'm not going to go into too long of a story here, but I think I kind of just sort of fell into my lap or got called into it. Growing up, I never had dreams of being like any type of healthcare provider or even going into any type of medicine. When I finished high school, I was kind of lost. I didn't know what the heck I wanted to do, went into university and kind of followed my older brother's path. He was doing business. And then I wasn't super into it. Ended up taking some time off and then went back into university and started in kind of the sciences. And during one of my summers, I ended up basically working a summer job with a girl who's in first year naturopathic school. We just really resonated and hit it off. And she just kind of, a lot of that summer, she sort of got me interested in naturopathic medicine. Actually, a good family friend of ours was really into holistic types of therapies, and she went to like really the only naturopath or one of two naturopaths in Kamloops at that time. This is probably around 2006. And I actually went and saw him one time. So I had a little bit of experience with what a naturopath was. Thought it was totally cool. Really liked the whole vibe of even just being at his clinic and the whole just sort of like I guess the approach, sort of like the system, how he sat down with me for an hour and yeah, just really kind of wanted to learn about what was going on. So at that time, I didn't think too much of it. I just thought it was super cool. I liked the whole vibe. And then yeah, when I was working with this girl during a summer job, I started to take it seriously and really consider it. And by the end of the summer, I'd pretty much kind of like looked into it hard and kind of made up my mind. I was in my first year of my science degree. And then I actually I wasn't like an insane student through high school or even the previous university years that I did. But if I apply myself, I knew I could crush it. And I just I made sure I got an insane grades. It turns out I didn't necessarily need these insane grades in the end, but I wanted to make sure I got into naturopathic school. And I remember the day I kind of got my call for my interview, it was sounds corny, but it was one of the coolest days of my life. Just to get an interview, not even better than the day I graduated naturopathic school. So yeah, long story short, that's how I got into it.
That's incredible. Well, I'm so grateful that you did. You were one of the first people to make me feel really heard. I had been dealing with all of this hormonal issues since I was a teenager, and I had been, through the system, and it did help me in its own way, but I never felt like anyone educated me on what was going on or even ever asked me anything about my lifestyle. Right. That was really big. You pointed out so many things to me that I now, public speak on now is like sleep. How's my stress levels? You did a cortisol test for me. Then looking at those results, it just blew my mind seeing that my progesterone was in the tank and my cortisol was so high, which I'm sure you see quite regularly now, because I know that's very common, but it was just so empowering to go from one system to another into natural, into more of like a holistic thing, because I'd never been to anyone's practice before. I'd never dove into natural medicine at all. And that was, a big shift for me to start looking at my body as a whole instead of just the bits everyone else was trying to talk to me about.
Yeah.
It was really a good experience. And getting those labs done, getting those tests done, it was so powerful to see. And it just gave me this beautiful view that I then, ran with from there. And then I discovered toxin-free living as well, right? That external environment, it all kind of fell into the place at the same time. So I'm so grateful that you became a naturopath.
Well, here's what I'll tell you. It's interesting is that's kind of the way that I felt when I saw this guy for the first time. So just kind of paying it forward, I guess. Like, that's literally like, yeah, you just put into words sort of the similar experience that I had. So,
That's beautiful, because a lot of
yeah.
women I talk to, that's their biggest complaint, is they don't feel heard. They constantly get told that, oh, what you're dealing with is just normal female problems, and they'll either get brushed off or put on something that they don't truly understand, or it's more of a band-aid and they're not looking at root cause. And so a lot of women get very frustrated when they're looking for support with their hormones. So like the best advice I can give people out there is like, dive into other modalities, right? If one isn't serving you, there's so many out there that want to help you, that will align with you, right? Not everything is for everybody, but something is out there for you that can help you. And I deeply believe that. Do you see a lot of, like I said, like that high progesterone, low cortisol? What would you say you see most when women come in to see you?
Yeah, honestly, to be honest with you, I'd actually say it's with the cortisol, it's almost the opposite. It is like, yes, high cortisol is not a great thing, but I more so see and it's not every single person, but a lower cortisol pattern. Just to me, the way I think about it is it's more of a late stage kind of burnout. If you're all of a sudden, life's going along great, and then all of a sudden, yeah, things start to get stressful. Yeah, your cortisol levels are going to rise, and you can feel like you can feel anxious. You can feel just kind of wired, difficulty sleeping. And yeah, just not feeling great when your cortisol is too high. But usually what I typically see is more people in sort of that later stage of it, where it's like, okay, all of a sudden the body just can't keep up with the demand for cortisol, and it's kind of lower grade, or sorry, flatlined a little more. And then yeah, you can be anxious, you're tired, you're depressed. Just the best feeling that, or sorry, the best word that encompasses it is just burnout, essentially.
Yeah.
The other names for it are adrenal fatigue. I don't like to use that word because I think it's thrown around a little too much in alternative medicine, but I feel burnout is a word that everyone kind of understands, and I feel like it's pretty darn common, just with sort of the demands on most of us in society, essentially.
Yeah. And right before we started recording here, you were saying that like that middle-aged woman, moms, you see a lot of in that burnout stage as well.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, I would tell you, I do treat quite a few men, but obviously it's for most naturopaths, whether you're a male or female practitioner, some people more in sports medicine, yeah, they'll see kind of more of an even mix. But just kind of the nature of the type of practice that I work in, yeah, it's probably 70% women. And that's I called it when we were offline, or before we started recording, I called them kind of archetypes of different types of patients. But I tell you, that's one of the most common one. It's not just middle age, it can be younger women, even like mid to late 20s. Yeah, all the way up to like people who are, in menopause even. Because there's a whole other kind of ball of wax in terms of hormones around then, but they can have a lot of the same symptoms. All three of those type of age groups can be experiencing burnout, right?
Yeah. And all sorts of hormonal woes.
Yeah, for sure.
Absolutely. So I mean, you're practicing in a couple different areas right now, and you take online patients as well, as long as they're in BC.
Yes. Yeah. I mean, I've got a consulting practice where I see people kind of in a different, how should I say, a different sort of, it's just a different sort of model, essentially. Those patients can be kind of all over North America. But in BC, yes, I do see patients all over the province via telemedicine.
Yeah, that's amazing. And now, so you do have a coaching program as well, which I think is really exciting. So you were describing it in a way of, it gives you more freedom and more one-on-one time with people, which I think is a beautiful thing about coaching, is you're getting more of their time and you can give them more information without kind of trying to overwhelm them in one appointment per month, you were saying. And so I would love to actually hear more about your coaching program, because you mentioned talking about 6 pillars of health from your perspective. And I think people need to hear those kind of things and hear that it's more of a holistic approach when we're talking about health. It is environment, it is your internal health, it is so much more things than just one section of your body giving you woe.
Yeah. So it's practicing in a completely different capacity. It is it's lots of times it's a completely different type of patient. But basically, from my perspective, I find it more rewarding. It's not that I'm not passionate about like my patients and stuff in brick and mortar practice, but for me, it's just more rewarding because I guess you can say I can sleep at night better with that model of practice, because I know from my perspective, I'm teaching people what I think health is, and that's kind of biased, right? But I'm in a network of practitioners who do use the same kind of model, and there is some parts of it that are a little bit unconventional. I think parts of it are a little bit progressive. I think they're a little bit ahead of the curve in a sense, not to be arrogant in that way.
No,
But
boast away. I think that's great.
yeah, I mean, a big part of it is generally the type of I was mentioning to you earlier. The type of person can be someone who's super health conscious, and that's part of like I share a lot of. I got 2 Instagram accounts. I share a lot of my consulting practice on one Instagram account, and then it's more my brick and mortar on the other one. But a lot of the people that kind of reach out to me are pretty darn health conscious. They've done a lot of things. They've tried different practitioners. Tried different types of modalities and styles of eating and all that kind of stuff. And in some ways, like a kind of not in an arrogant way, but I kind of poke fun of that on my other Instagram account. And I try and just educate people that you go on social media and there's so much information coming at you. If you're a healthcare consumer, it's like, oh, well, pay attention to me over here. I'm doing this therapy, or this diet worked for this type of diagnosis. But I'm going to tell you, the only absolute in medicine, at least from my perspective, is it's called biochemical individuality. And that means that every single person, it doesn't matter if you take 100 people with Hashimoto's, 100 people with rheumatoid arthritis, if whatever type of condition, generally, yes, the diagnosis is the same. The lab values and the imaging that get you to that diagnosis is pretty darn similar. But I'm going to tell you how you got there for each person in that 100-person group. Underneath that diagnosis and those lab values and that imaging, it's completely different. Just because all of us, you and me are different genetically. If you look at the cameras right here, we look different. So we're different genetically. Right now, we're in different environments. I'm at my place, you're at your place. We have different, basically different. Our biochemistry does not run. When you open up a textbook in university biology, that's not how biochemistry runs in everyone. Everyone's got different enzyme activity, different nutrient needs, different digestive capacity. So everything is just basically so different in every person. That's why you can't really, I'm not a big person for protocols for disease. Like, oh, here's a Hashimoto's protocol. Let's take you through these steps. I'm more of a person where, okay, yeah, you've got Hashimoto's, you've got this diagnosis, we're going to consider that. But when you start looking underneath, and I do a lot of functional medicine for these patients, I wouldn't call myself a functional medicine practitioner. That's just one of the tools I use, is you do nutritional and biochemical panels on these people, and there's no 2 people have the same results. No 2 people get the same supplements. There's patterns in dietary stuff that can be common, but no 2 people necessarily have the same diet. So yeah, it's really personalized, kind of, I guess you could call it precision medicine. And it's not just about like gut health, and it's not just about avoiding toxins. There's kind of 4 pillars of it. There's environment, lifestyle, mindset, nutrition. And I think earlier we were talking a little bit about the environment, but I'm kind of rambling on here.
No, I think it's great. I think it's so great. I think people need to hear this so much. I'm a big believer in individual, right? Down to our cellular makeup, like you're talking about. We are so individual that what worked for Beth might not work for Karen, might not work for Clayton, might not work for Amy. And so I think it's so beautiful that there are practices out there that can literally hone in on you as the individual, because I can't tell you how awful it feels to be put into a box and not have that box serve you at all.
Yeah.
right? If you've been put in that box of you have this condition, here's all the things you can do for it, but then you don't feel like you've been helped and none of those things have worked for you, you feel like, I mean, you lose hope. You feel like you can't be helped. You feel like you're broken and that you're different from all the other people who have been helped in that way. And it is a very defeating place to be in. I've been there.
No,
Yeah.
for sure.
So I think that's
and
so
I mean,
beautiful.
that's kind of the unfortunately, that's kind of the current model, is putting you into a box. And once you got your label, you're put into that box. And then here are the treatments available. And if they don't work for you, and lots of times they don't, that's why people end up coming and seeing people like me. Then yeah, I mean, if those treatments don't work for you, you end up looking elsewhere. So
yeah, which I think that it's so amazing that there are elsewheres to go. Elsewheres, I don't think that's the word, but I deeply believe that it's so needed. It's so needed to help people understand that they are an individual and that they can keep going. Something didn't work for them, keep going to the next person. That didn't work for them, go to the next system.
Yeah. And like I said, one of the key points I wanted to make about that rant was that, yes, just the concept of diagnoses. We need diagnoses because it's a way that medical practitioners can communicate. It's a way that, we need some type of organization within medicine. And we need to know, have an idea and a picture and a concept of what a person's dealing with in terms of symptoms and that kind of stuff. But that's where it's limited, is what I mentioned before, is it like under the diagnosis, it's a completely different, generally it's a completely different process, right? So that's just one of the key points I wanted to make about that. And then the other thing I would just tell you is I'm certainly not the practitioner for everybody. And one of the beauties about naturopathic medicine is that my graduating class, like the school that I went to on the West Coast, is actually a pretty small school. Like most graduating cohorts are anywhere from 35 to 40 people. But I can tell you, I'm still, when you go through a program like that, like an intense program like that, you're still pretty close with all, or a good majority of the people that you went to school with. So you kind of keep tabs on each other. But I would tell you that there's probably 40 different types of practitioners that came out of that class, and every single naturopath generally has their own kind of style, right? So there's a fit for anyone listening. There's a fit for a naturopath out there for people. There's, in the town that I work in, or that we live in, there's 15 different NDs, and they all kind of have like their different styles, right? And different things that they focus on, different things that they treat. If you had say you had X condition and you went to me, and then you went to the 14 other practitioners, you're going to get 14 different ways to treat, essentially. So that's one of the cool things about it.
I think that is really cool. And I think the more, as healthcare practitioners, we embrace that and refer out when we need to, what a beautiful system we could create. Like when I had my practice going and people said, oh, I have knee pain, I was like, I am not your person. I'm not the person for you to come to for your knee pain. Knees are not my favorite. You have a pelvic imbalance, I'm your girl. Let me put that back in there for you. But knees were not my thing. And so I knew who within even my own clinic that I was working in, who I would send them to. Because this other gal loved knees. She was great. All about the lower half of the body, loved legs. I was the opposite. I was like, let me look at your pelvis up. Not that I don't know it's all connected, but if that was the main thing, then yeah, it wasn't my thing. So I'd happily refer out, and they would happily refer women to me who were dealing with pre and postnatal things and pelvic imbalances and things, because they knew that I had done more continuing ed on that and things. And that's the other thing too, with healthcare practitioners, once you're out, you can do continuing education in your interests. So whereas you might have done some training that another one hasn't, and that's how that gets all created. So I think that's really important for people to understand, is that they just have to keep going, because they're not meant to feel the way they're feeling. Like you said, in that burnout, in that overwhelm, however they got there, they're not meant to feel that way. Just like women aren't meant to feel overwhelmed 2 weeks minimum out of the year for their hormone needs and things and their hormone issues, right? We're not meant to feel that way. And it's so important to just understand that and to keep going and find something that's going to help and serve you.
Yeah, I mean, I think a lot of things are just kind of like, I mean, normalize is kind of the word of the day, but yeah, like it's kind of normal now to be like like when I talk a good majority, I always ask people what their energy levels are. I always give them a scale rating out of 1 to 10 kind of thing. And yeah, I'd say it's rare to see people, 8 and above. Most people are like, they're really bad. They're sitting at 3 or 4, or they're anywhere up from kind of their ceilings, like 6, 7 out of 10, right? I mean, that's not terrible, but it's kind of functioning levels of energy. And that tends to be the norm, or just people just kind of having other types of symptoms where it's just like, oh, okay, well, that's normal. Or that's what you hear from your GP.
Yes.
Because they're seeing so many people like that, and that is normal, relatively. But to me, I don't think that necessarily falls into the category of healthy, right?
No, like you said, they're just in that normal, like not the normal. I mean, I love saying just because it's common doesn't make it normal or
Yeah,
okay,
exactly.
right? So yes, it is very common to see people probably sitting at that 6 and telling themselves that they're fine, right?
Yeah.
Oh, I'm fine. This is normal for me. I think we need to like raise our standards a little
I
bit
see
of what it
people,
means to
this is
feel
common too,
good.
is I see people, they don't even know, they're questioning whether their energy is good or not.
Yeah.
Because they're like, it's been so long that they're literally like, they can't even recall the last time they felt high energy. So they're almost wrestling with themselves where they're like, is this what the best energy is? Like, and to me, that's an issue. That's like a warning sign. It's like, holy crap, like, you don't even know what it feels like. You can't even remember that far back what it feels like to have energy. Like, we got a problem here, right?
And there's an environmental thing there too, is they're probably in their head comparing it to the average person they're hanging out with as well. Compared to so and so, I'm probably pretty good. I'm pretty average compared to all my other friends in this group. So I'm probably pretty good. We all have about the same energy level, which is why when we're working on health goals or any kind of goals, we want to make sure we're hanging out with the people where we want to go instead of what we're dealing with, right?
Yeah.
Even in health, we're basically the average of the 5 people we spend the most time with. And so, yeah, if you're comparing yourself to those around you, that's another thing. You kind of have to dive into that individual state. Do I feel energetic? Would I like to have more energy, more vibrancy, more joy, and all of those beautiful feelings that, taking your health into your own hands can bring, and making those shifts?
Mm-hmm. No, I agree 100%.
Yeah. And I really deeply believe more and more people need to hear that. But I love that you brought just the individual to the table. And so through your coaching, you're able to do those kind of tests and things as well to like hone into that individual cellular makeup.
Yeah. I'd have to do a screen share here to show you all these tests and what they mean, and it would probably put everyone to sleep. But yes, like that's where okay, to me, it really depends on the patient, right? Like in brick and mortar practice, it's like sometimes people aren't willing to, or just don't have the finances to invest in some type of laboratory workup like that. But I'm just telling you, the potential is like, yeah, you can get super dialed in terms of like sort of looking under the hood is what I call it, to see what your body's needs are, right? And in terms of what type of supplements you want that you're needing in terms of support for nutrition, or like biochemical pathways in terms of like a macronutrient ratio that would be suggested for you. Doesn't mean you have to follow it, but if you're a sick person, you want to be doing a lot of things right? You need as many things working in your favor, in terms of just foods to eat to help some of your nutrient deficiencies, foods to avoid, preservatives to avoid, chemicals to, well, obviously a lot of people want to be avoiding chemicals and preservatives, but there are tests that I run where that's some of the shortcomings of some of the food intolerance testing. There's kind of 2 different ones that I'll use, but I have a preferred one. Unfortunately, it's more expensive, but it looks at it's got almost an unlimited number of foods that you can test, but it also includes things like preservatives, additives, dyes, and that's one of the things that's missing from a lot of those food intolerance tests that I do and other practitioners do. Is it's like, okay, well, yeah, I've got this inflammatory condition or digestive condition. Here's out of 200 foods, here's the ones that I need to avoid. Well, okay, well, what about the different preservatives that can, even in healthy organic foods, that can actually be in the packaging? Okay. or yeah, just some of like, I know for you, a lot of the personal hygiene products and cleaning products, you guys have those dialed. But I mean, I see people reacting to things in their toothpaste, in their deodorant, in their shampoo, in any type of like, yeah, cosmetic or personal hygiene product, and then things in the environment. Just different biological things like mold, or what are other things? Like sometimes you can't identify where you're being exposed to the chemical you're reacting to. And that's where, when we were talking offline, that's where it's like, okay, part of this coaching is I show people the best way to clean up your water and mineralize it. The best way to clean up your indoor air. Like I said earlier, people don't even realize, I don't care if you've got an old home or you got a brand new build, people's home, the air in their homes, it's terrible. You can't smell it unless you really got a problem. But there's formaldehyde, there's particulates, there's VOCs, and it's like, it's coming off. Looks like you've got some wood paneling, some of the wood paneling above me. It's coming out of your carpet. It's coming out of your brand new furniture or old furniture. So those are just, and then that's just one part of it, right? So yeah, those are some of the environmental things that I like to like at least show people how big of a deal it is, because I'm not just a gut health guy. I mean, not everyone can do all the things that I teach them, but at least they have that awareness and knowledge, right?
Well, absolutely. And awareness is one of the biggest things. And I love that you teach people about their environment. And I know that can be like an overwhelming conversation to have with people, but yes, our home environment is very typically one of the most toxic environments we're exposed to because we spend the most time there. But how beautiful is it to empower people that that's actually the environment they have the most control over? Yes. So once they learn about it, 100%. You can discern, right? You can make those decisions. And if you're giving them specific needs to know, like which one specifically not to bring in their house, that's huge. That's huge.
And I'll just explain to you, because we had this conversation before we started recording here, is sometimes people are like, well, what are you talking about environment? Like, what the heck does that even matter? Well, I'll give you the example of epigenetics, that it's like, okay, epigenetics is how your environment, and there's lots of components of environment. There's your diet, there's your actual physical environment, there is your relationships. Those are all kind of environmental influences that essentially can dictate how your genes are expressed. So what I mentioned earlier is, okay, here's an example of that. So we hop on a jet and we fly up to the Arctic right now, and all of a sudden we're just dressed like we are, okay? All of a sudden our genetic expression changes because we're in a completely different, we're not in our warm homes, we're in a completely different environment. We start making heat shock proteins and we start shivering, okay? Then we hop on a plane and we get in our swimsuits and we're hanging out on the beach in Cancun. Well, all of a sudden, okay, we just switched environments and that changed our genetic expression again. So now all of a sudden we're going to turn on genes to make melanin so our skin can tan. So those are just like simple examples of how an environment dictates your genetic expression. Well, on a day-to-day basis, like literally right now, it's probably -16, -18 outside. You walk outside and your genetic expression shifts. Okay, and you go through different environments in your day. There's certain environments, like you just mentioned, your home or your workplace. Well, those can be health affirming or they can be a detriment to your health, right? And the things I teach people, sometimes it's a little bit too much for certain people, but I want to give them all the information of the things that I've learned about. Like some of the things I mentioned earlier, like so light exposure. I said everybody's pretty aware nowadays. Most people, first off, most people aren't even sleeping properly anymore. Most people do not know what good sleep is. I talked to 2 patients today. They said, oh yeah, I'm sleeping pretty good. Yeah, I can fall asleep okay, and I can stay asleep. And then my follow-up question to that is always, okay, so how do you feel when are you wake and rested in the morning? And they're like, no, I never wake rested. I could probably count on one hand or 2 hands in the last 6 months the amount of people who say they wake rested, at least before we start working together. So yeah, a big component of that is just we are screwing up our circadian rhythms with all this light, all these screens, all these phones, all these bright LED lights that are above us, what that's doing, and this is where I'm going to get into some of the crazy shit, but what
Love
that's
it.
doing is your brain doesn't know the difference between daylight outside in the middle of the day and what's coming off your screen or your compact fluorescent bulbs house at 10 or 11 p.m. So what you do is you're like, oh, okay, well, I'm going to go to bed. So I'm flipping off my TV, turning off my tablet, and your brain still thinks it's midday because it's got all this bright light coming in. And it's the blue and green part of the spectrum that destroys your melatonin production. So you, this is what you do is okay, it's time for bed. You turn off all your lights, you sleep, you go and sleep in your room. And most people don't sleep in total darkness, which they should be, because for optimal melatonin production, you need complete darkness, or that's the best environment for it. So it'll take, 3 hours or so for you to make optimal melatonin levels where you're going to be going through all those stages of sleep. And it's like, okay, so you go to bed at 11 o'clock, by 2 or 3, finally you're making good melatonin, and then your alarm goes off at 6 a.m. or 6:30 a.m. And it's like, you've had 4 okay hours of sleep and you expect to feel rested. So figure that one out, right? Those are some of the things that those are some of the small things that people don't realize how much that kind of stuff and the way that we're living in our environment, how we interact with our environment, are affecting our sleep.
Mm-hmm.
The other thing that I talked about was just electromagnetic field exposure. So I don't live in a cave. I use a cell phone. But it's just like, we've got all people, you can't taste this, you can't sense it, you can't feel it, you can't see it. But there's, and then this is a little bit of a controversial topic, but I can go deeper into it. Basically, the safety standards, they're based on, okay, these things don't heat up tissues enough and they don't ionize like X-rays. But here's the thing is there's other biological effects that isn't recognized, and that's not what the safety standards are based on. So that's why we kind of get away with just not seeing that as a concern. But there's just so many different exposures that we're just like is normal now. And there's known effects on like stress hormones, there's known effects on like sleep quality. So those are just some of the things that we dive into, and that's just a part of my approach. So
I think that's incredible because it is. There's so much. Actually, you were one of the people that taught me to go out and get sunshine in my eyes first thing in the morning as soon as I can. So not usually in -16 like it is right now. Do I go out there?
I'll just open my front door and I'll like just literally just kind of peer out for the first like couple, even if you get a minute. Like, or 30 seconds, and then you do it a couple times, right?
Yes, which is good. But in the mornings, like when it's spring and summer, when it's nice out, I'll go make sure I have like my tea out on the deck first thing in the morning, kind of thing. I mean,
and we should probably explain to people like what the heck, what's the point of that, right?
Because it's so worth it.
Okay, so that's part of your circadian rhythm, is that's controlled by light, and you just want it like the first sort of morning light to set your body's clock. You've got a clock in the brain. That first morning light should be daylight. Because if you look at your bright cell phone, it's like, okay, well, that's light that looks pretty similar to midday sun. So, okay, it's 12 o'clock. So you get up and all of a sudden your timing's off right off the bat in the morning. And then people start to wonder why they have issues with hormones and things like that, because their timing is completely off. And I mean, I get a little bit passionate about some of this stuff, but
I love it.
they know that like every kind of, there's a whole field of medicine now, or science, it's called chronobiology. So basically the timing of biology, and pretty much every mammal has this, and I believe plants do too. But they now know that, and they gave a Nobel Prize to a group of scientists in 2017 for this, but they know that circadian biology or circadian rhythm is linked to literally every 21st century disease now. So you can, and I can show you how you can look into this. You go and type into Google, type in circadian rhythm and depression, type in circadian rhythm and anxiety, type in circadian rhythm and autoimmunity, type in circadian rhythm and cancer. And there's a component to that disease that is about your body's timing. And for
Wow.
the reasons I said before, everybody's timing is screwed up because they don't pay attention to light cycles and they
Hmm.
don't sleep properly.
Yeah. Well, I mean, people don't prioritize sleep as is, but I don't think there's enough of an understanding of what is also really affecting your sleep. And sleep, I mean, like you said, you should spend some time looking into how important your sleep is for your health because it literally affects everything.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's so incredible. That's so powerful. No, I mean, all the nerd talk. I love it.
Yeah.
It's
Yeah. I
my
mean,
favorite.
you're behind the eight ball every day if you're not waking rested. And
Yeah.
I believe some cases of sleep are actually quite challenging to fix, but I would tell you for a good majority of people, sleep should be an fairly easy fix. And it's, I mean, I'm not going to take over this entire podcast and make it about sleep or circadian rhythm, but literally, like I've shared a number of times on my kind of Instagram, just trying to educate people about this.
Hmm.
Sleep is there's some hormonal components of sleep that can be
Yep.
a big barrier. But I would tell you for a lot of people, for almost close to free, without taking a bunch of supplements or hormones or anything, if you're doing the right lifestyle stuff and like that, you can fix your sleep without taking a bunch of sleep pills or even sleep supplements.
Yes, again,
And I
getting
mean,
back to that
I can
lifestyle,
go into that, but
environment. Well, yeah. And I could pick your brain for hours and hours. People who know me know that like this is like my sweet spot, my jam, when people
right,
can talk all things body and health and anatomy, and especially bringing in your external environment. That is
yeah,
so important to me because that was the turning point in my health. I
yeah,
got my insides, getting regulated and going better when I was seeing you. And then I started really addressing my external environment. And that's what changed everything. I was
yeah.
doing things to support my body, but I was still causing too much harm externally that it wasn't, allowing it to catch up. So it just making that shift was so important. So it's such
Yeah,
a
I'm gonna
huge
tell
thing.
you that I'm not sure how deep we can get into like your situation, but I'm gonna tell you, when you mentioned to me earlier that some of the treatments that we had used and you would come off them and never had like any type of like sort of relapse or any return of symptoms, I would tell you, to me, that's pretty darn amazing.
I feel amazing about it.
Yeah.
I do because I
But
feel
I would
like,
tell you that's not common, like for the average
yeah.
person, unless they go to those measures that you did. So
Well, we were talking earlier because people want to be given something to fix it.
yeah.
Right? Give me this thing to fix it. You helped me with progesterone support. I took it, yes, and it helped me. But if I'm
Mhm.
not dealing with the root causes of it, right? Once I come off of that stuff, yeah, of course, stuff's going to go back to how it was because if my lifestyle is the same, if my
Yeah.
environment's the same, if everything that got me to that place of needing progesterone support wasn't addressed, of course, people go back.
Mhm.
Right. So I think that's why that's so powerful that you're talking about not only individuality, because that's so important, but that external environment and what is your lifestyle like, because that's what needs to shift long term. And it is
Yeah.
something that I think can be daunting to people when they think about it, when they hear of the list of things that I have done. But that's been years of my life. It's okay to take small, consistent action for those wins over time.
Mhm.
That's what I'm a big believer in. Do you find that people do better with small, consistent changes instead of, taking on 100% of it all and then it's
Oh yeah.
overwhelming and then they give up, right?
Yeah. No, 100%. Like it's like what do they call it? Drinking from a fire hose. Like
Yeah.
you got to meet the person where they're at, kind of thing, right?
Yes. Yes,
Um,
absolutely. And like you said, bringing awareness and then people can decide, in those moments what they need to address first
yeah.
and then go from there. Once they've had the wins and the success with the thing they needed to address first, they can move on to the next one. But it's the awareness of not only is this possible. So a lot of women tell me, well, I don't think it's possible for me to fix my hormones. Well, it is possible, but you have to be willing to take the steps and go through the ups and downs and go through the ebbs and flows that happen when you're adjusting your health. Sometimes,
Mhm.
yeah, you're on this uphill streak and then all of a sudden it's like, oh, I didn't address my B vitamins. Wow. Or, oh, my environment needed some like support. Oh, like,
Yeah.
right.
No,
As
I
long as
agree.
your trajectory is uphill, you're doing great, right? It's okay to have those ebbs and flows while you're figuring it out because you're an individual and it's different for you than it was for someone else.
Yeah, and you see that meme that's shared fairly common. What is it? It's like, I'm sure a lot of people have seen it. It's like, oh, there's healing. It's healing what you expect, and it's just a steady
Right?
incline. And then reality, it's like that. Exactly. You know what I'm
Yeah, I
talking
literally show those two arrows when I do my newest presentation that I created. It's like, this is what you want it to be, and this is what it's really like. But as long as you're going
about.
uphill, right? That's
Yeah.
what matters. And the beautiful thing is there are people and modalities and tests and things to support you along the way. So if there's one thing not working for you, pivot,
Yeah.
right? Pivot. There's so much out there.
100%. Yeah.
Yes,
And that goes back to
absolutely.
what I talked about in terms of the individual, right? So
Yes. Yes, which I appreciate
like
you
what
bringing
works
up.
for your friends or whoever, another family member isn't necessarily going to be, what you're particularly needing.
Absolutely. Okay. Well, I feel like we could talk forever. Um, so thank you for your time. I mean, I deeply believe time is our only limited commodity. So I
Mhm.
appreciate you bringing your time and your brain and your expertise here. I mean, maybe we'll have to have you back so we can dive into more of those different areas. But my biggest takeaway today for sure was embrace yourself as an individual who needs individual care to keep going,
Yeah.
address your environment, and sleep is so important.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, one other thing I'd like to add just to your listeners too is like, don't keep in mind, like, a lot of times medicine it's an opinion. I mean, there's facts in medicine too, but a lot of times people are taking those facts through their filter, or like some type of practitioner is taking, whether it's your medical doctor or your naturopath or whatever, they are interpreting that through their filters. And if you don't like sort of like an opinion that you're getting or a prognosis, or if someone tells you that like this is the way it's going to be, and you just don't jive with that, or you don't feel comfortable with that, like go and get another opinion. Go to, like I said earlier, in my profession, every naturopath's pretty different. So someone might come to me and they might not like what I say. So I'd say if you don't jive with your practitioner, be an advocate for yourself. Go and seek another opinion. It never hurts to get a different opinion, to get a different perspective. And something that I see frequently when I see patients who said, "Oh, I went and saw this person," whether it doesn't matter what type of practitioner it is, you hear of people making mistakes, and I guarantee you I've made mistakes. So just from that kind of perspective, that mistakes and wrong diagnoses or whatever are made all the time in medicine, and practitioners are just human. But really, the point I'm trying to make here is if you're not happy with your healthcare provider, go find someone, keep going to different practitioners until you find someone that you jive with.
Yes. Thank you so much for saying that. Self-advocacy literally saved my life. Like
Yeah.
learning to stand up for myself and being strong enough and knowing, you know what, something's wrong.
Yeah.
And I get that you're telling me that nothing is wrong, sir, but something is wrong. And me standing up for myself in that way, which I don't even know if I've told that story on here. Maybe one day I will, but I had an internal bleed. I was dying.
Oh,
And
wow.
someone kept telling me that I wasn't. And so learning to stand in that space, being like, you know what, I know my body best. I know
Yeah.
something is wrong. We all have that power. We all have that power to know what we feel
Mhm.
and to stand up for when we want to feel better.
For sure. Yeah.
Yeah, thank you so much. Thank you for being here. I'm going to make sure Dr. Bostock's information, Instagram accounts, and all things are in the show notes so that you can find him. And yeah, thank you so much for being here. And thanks for listening.
Yeah, this was fun. Thanks for having me.
You know it.